Hello patrons and welcome back to another tutorial. Once again, we're just going to make sure everything is transferring properly to the streaming software, which it looks like it is. And today we're going to be working on the zebra painting. Finally, I'm sorry that it's late and wasn't in time for our August challenge, but I want to get it done for you now. And then we'll do 2 new tutorials for September, so make sure you get everything that you paid for. Did I say September before? I meant August if I said September. I can't believe it's September. Anyway, between the last video and now, I have gone through some different color schemes and decided what I wanted to work on for this one. And it was a little bit hard trying to decide how to do the rainbow idea that I had in mind. I didn't want to do just a straight rainbow from like one side to the other. I was thinking about doing just jewel tones with maybe purples and blues, but I've done other paintings like that before. So I thought it'd be really cool to do this as if it were the proper picture using really bright colors. So our shadow tones are still going to be dark and our highlights are still going to be bright. I'm going to be using quinacridone gold and quinacridone burnt orange for the areas of black stripes that are in light, and then we're going to use the purples, greens, and blues for the areas of black that are in shadow. Before we do any of that, we are going to go through with a base wash layer. I don't know how well you can see it in the world's tiniest little thumbnail for a zebra, but there is a very pale wash on this thumbnail that we're going to go through and tint the white color so that it's not just a stark white background. So we actually have some form going on with this zebra. So the format for this video is going to be that we're going to do that wash. I'm going to need to mute you guys for a little bit as we dry it, just because it's probably going to take a minute or 2 to dry. And then we'll come back and work on all the stripes. I'm hoping I can get them all done in one sitting. I can't promise that. I don't know how long this video is going to be. I've never done a piece like this with this much intricacy in terms of color planning and having to have foresight to move across the painting on the fly like this. So it might take 2 sessions. We'll try and make it 1. We'll see how far we get today before I need a break. Hope that sounds okay with you, and I hope that you are having a good day. So if you missed it already, the last video we did transferred the photograph that I took while I was in Africa. I don't think I mentioned that in that video, but this is a photo I took in Africa, and put it on our Arches watercolor paper. I'm going to be using my Studio palette today, which has a bunch of different brands in it. Let's see, we're going to be using Quin Magenta from Core, Rose of Ultramarine from Daniel Smith. We have Winsor Violet from Winsor Newton. This is just the one that I've had since I started painting years and years and years ago because it's so strong, but any Dioxazine Violet would be fine. We're going to be using Phthalo Turquoise, which is PB16. We're going to be using this guy down here. I point to it. is Ultramarine Turquoise. So it's a phthalo green mixed with ultramarine blue from Daniel Smith, but you can use any other tealy turquoisey color too if you want. This just leans a little bit more green than the phthalo turquoise does. And then the quinacridone gold by Daniel Smith and the quinacridone burnt orange by Daniel Smith. So those will all be listed in the description below along with all the other supplies. We already have our painting taped to our backing board. I'm going to probably be using my silver black velvet brush. Words are hard. Am I saying this right? Silver black velvet brushes. So I was doing my little thumbnail with this little guy, but let's go ahead and grab a couple bigger ones for our larger washes. We've got some size 8s. Yeah, some size 8s. I've got 2 cups of water that are off screen. This is on an 8x10 piece of paper. Well, it'll eventually be 8x10. It's on a 9x12 right now, and it's taped to a bigger backing board. So I want you to be zoomed in enough that you can see. I just noticed you can see off to the table over here as part of the non-magical area. I wanted you to be able to see the entire workspace. What am I trying to say? Oh my goodness. I want you to be able to see the details, which means you won't be able to see the entire workspace today. We kind of switch off back and forth when we do videos between you being able to see really close up and being able to see the entire workspace. This is kind of just going to be in between, and I hardly ever film with this, but just the size of this palette and the size of this painting, that's where we need to be today. So, just making sure we're all set. We're gonna move this off to the side. I guess our little zebra friend can hang out. He's gonna get wet there though. From over here. And I'm gonna make sure, it looks like there's some pigment in these brushes, so I'm gonna make sure that they're rinsed out. And I do want to say also, I think the screen is a little bit dark right now, but on the if I make it much brighter, it blows out the highlights. So I know that this is pretty dark and murky, but hopefully this will be exposed since we are working on a white piece of paper and have such detailed lines. I think that the darker exposure is the best way to go, so you can see what's kind of happening. All right, it's gonna be one of those tricky ones for me, with the water glasses being so far away, but we'll do our best. So I'm going to be making a dark mixture here. I think you can still see that. This is the Rose of Ultramarine and the, did I use Phthalo Turquoise or did I use Ultramarine Turquoise? Let's go with the Phthalo Turquoise just because this is already a granulating color and we won't have, well, it's the same granulating color. We're going to use the Phthalo Turquoise. Any bluish green in color will work. We're trying to get a nice, dark, moody, teal type color. I decide if I want it to lean more teal or more purple. I kind of like that. And then we are going to add a bunch of water. And I'm going to take my reference image, I have it here off to the side. I want to make sure I'm looking at that, and I really want to focus on the areas of shadow, and this is going to be some pretty vague, broad strokes at this point. It's going to look dark and scary at first. We will soften these off. We need to move fairly quickly just because there is a phthalo color in here, and if we let it sit for too long, it's never going to soften off. It looks really dark right now, but remember that it'll lighten as it dries. And when we put in those stripes, it's going to look a lot lighter than it is right now just because of relativity. It's colors in relation to others. We're using a clean, damp brush just to carve out that shape there. I'm gonna continue down this whole section of the face that is behind the center ridge is in shadow. And then we can feather this out further. We don't want any of this to compete with our nice rainbow assortment of stripes. But I do want it to be able to tell this is a three-dimensional animal. As you all know, I haven't done a ton of painting lately, and the painting that I have done has been with the Roman Schmal, so readjusting to painting with my normal brand of watercolors. It's welcoming, but it's still an adjustment. I'm going to Going to do the entire snout while we're down here. I want to keep in mind what we talked about in the last video of making sure that there are still areas of highlight within the shadow. So this bottom lip is really dark, but we want to make sure that this ridge here that comes down from the nostril still has its lighter value. So what we can do is we can take a brush and lift the pigment from that area, and that's something that we were having a lot of trouble with the Roman Schmal watercolors because of how well that they flow. And this, you'll still see that they flow, but at least we can control them a little bit more. This will of course get much darker as we progress. I'm getting a bloom right here that I am going to try not to worry about. We're gonna try and let it do its watercolor thing and not mess with it. Exercise in restraint for me. And then as we move over to the light side of the face, we can soften all of this off. I want so badly to fix that bloom, but I told myself I was going to leave it and we'll see what happens. All right, trying to remember which of my brushes had pigment in it. We're going to move up here where this is mostly dry and we shouldn't mess it up by putting another wash down. This whole bottom section of the ear is in shadow. Just gonna gently feather this off on the upper part of the ear because that does fade into a white. Almost all of this ear is in shadow though, even though there are some areas that are white versus black. It's all a muted white, a shadowy white. We'll leave a couple highlighted spaces on the white tufts of fur that are kind of poking out here. In the top of that ear, we won't go all the way up to the top. You can see a lot of the granulation coming out down here. It wasn't necessarily my intent, but we're going to be making that area much, much darker, so we won't see a lot of it anyway. And then the next main portion is going to be the underside of the neck. So we're going to make sure that we carve out where the jaw is. Nice heavy wash. Oops. You could do this part with a bigger brush if you would like to. I'm going to attempt to keep going with the brushes I have, just out of habit mostly, but you want to switch to bigger. Definitely wouldn't hurt. And we don't want these to be, if you look at the reference image, you can see that there are folds of skin that go vertically. So we don't want this shadow to end in a horizontal way. We want to use our brush to come up and down. Making sure that we rinse off our brush really well so that we can soften off this edge. And we're going to bring this wash actually all the way up so that we can put some curvature at the top of the neck. This is why I said it was going to take so long when we get out the heat tool to dry this. So we're going to take a nice juicy wet brush of color, and along this area here we're just going to put in a little bit of color, and then again up here. So horses and equines have these really large neck muscles that give their necks a lot of contour. So right now we're just trying to make sure that we don't have to go back later when we already have all our stripes in and risk re-wetting them in order to put in these areas. I do want to make sure, because we are going to have some of the yellows in this area. I don't know where my, oh, yes I do, here they are. Oh. Paper towels. And we're going to pick up the areas of highlight just so that when we go in with our yellows later, they don't get muddied. We want interest and contrast, but not muddiness. All right, I should be close to done with these washes, but we still need to work on this ear here. Probably should have done that before the neck. So this ear is a little bit more tricky. There is going to be more whites left, so I don't want to get too overzealous. We'll come down here to where the black stripe is. And then with our brush that has water in it, we're going to use the tip of our brush, kind of like we normally carve out fur with. Just move that all the way up here. chin, we have a cast shadow from the ear that goes this way. And this is probably the harshest shadow that is in the picture. I'm going to soften it off a little bit in our version. You can leave it hard if you'd like it to be. But hopefully that'll help give us some added depth that the light is really coming from this right side. All right, I'm just checking our reference. I'm gonna put a little bit in this inner corner. It's probably not gonna be very noticeable once everything else is done. And we also have a little bit in this area. Not as dark as the space under the chin, but darker than the space above it. I'm also going to do a tiny bit, very gently, in some of these white areas up here. I am going to erase this top line. To the point that I can barely see it on the paper, because I really don't want this to stick around afterwards. And we're just going to gently tease out, and I do mean very gently, this top line on the white areas. Yes, kitten, hi. Your hair is all over the art table, Miss Kitten. Okay. All right. Anything else? A little bit behind the eye. And a little bit behind the ear. Go back, make sure that this isn't in our white highlights. And I'm gonna go ahead and mute the camera real quick, just so that you're not listening to blasting noises for a minute or so. And I'll see you guys on the other side of it. Alrighty, I should be back now. Our paper has warped, as has our tape from the heat in the water, so that's another reason to stretch your paper if you so choose. I'm just going to push mine down again, nice and firmly. And now we can start the fun / terrifying part, and that's putting the actual stripes on. Stay hydrated, taking a sip of water. All right. For this, I'm going to work dark to light. Typically I like to work the other way around, and I'll definitely need to switch out my water when we get to those lighter golden colors. But I feel like for me personally, I really want to put these shadows in so that I can get a good idea of the range that I'm going to want to go between for this painting. So we have the shadows, which look really dark right now, but when we put these darker colors on top of them, they're going to lighten up a whole lot. So I'd like to see what we're working with and go from there. I know I should do the ear first, but I want to do the face first. So that's what we're going to do. Trying to get the picture as large as I can on my phone. And we are going to go in with, oh, what happened to my little guy? Did he fly off the table? Oh, he's over here. That's like a ton of information, but it's something. So for our very darkest color, if we need one, we can mix together this Phthalo Turquoise that we used earlier for the shadow with the Dioxazine Violet. And that's going to make a really deep inky blue type of color. And then we're going to transition from that into other tones. And I'm new to this. We haven't done a practice, so we're just going to see how it goes. Of course, the hard part in this is going to be to see where my lines are because they've got shadow on them now. So let's start with this one. I can tell where it is. Got a lot of paint on my brush. And like we talked about in the tracing video, if these don't end up perfect, unless you're doing this for a very specific person who works with a very specific animal at a zoo, it's probably not going to matter if you get a stripe or two wrong, because most people are not going to notice the difference. I had a lot of paint on my brush for this first one. I'm just trying to crisp up those edges and give there some variation. I don't want this to be completely one solid blue. I would like there to be areas that are a little darker and a little bit lighter, preferably in the corresponding body contours. I guess that's how I would say that, body contours. The stripe is getting way too long, but I'm not getting the right tip on it, so I'm trying to fix that. We're gonna lighten up this back edge because there's a little bit of a reflection on the far side. All right, let's go back in without quite so much this time. Got a fun little wonky stripe here. Am I blocking? Hopefully you guys can see this. I might want to switch down brush sizes because this one is just holding a little bit too much water. So we're gonna go to a 6. Oops. And I go and mess it up right away. Good job, Denise. And this actually connects. Whew. Got the fan going, it's drying out my puddles pretty quick. Not in exactly the right spot, but it's there now, so we'll work with it. I'm going to start to add some variety so that all of these aren't the same color. So this one's going to be a little bit more purple. We've got a skinny little here. I can't even see the pencil line anymore. It looks like a little lightning bolt. It blends in. And then we have another one that comes from like here down. And it curves back around this way. I'm not going to do the nose yet because I'm going to drag my hand through it. So we're going to move up from here. This time we're going to add more of the teal. We're going to swoop down and get our first real stripe going on. Try and tint these a little bit more tealish towards the tips here. Get a nice blend going on. I'll put a little bit more of the purple on the bottom side of this stripe. And that way we don't just have like teal, blue, blue, purple, purple. I don't want to speak for you. I want to kind of fade these colors together as a transition. I'm just gonna put a little bit more here, not all the way to the edge, as I mentioned before. I want to leave that little area of highlight or reflection on the far side. Get more of that teal and add a little bit more water to it. And I think I'm actually even going to pull in a little bit of that ultramarine turquoise. And there's a thinner stripe here. The next stripe comes all the way down from the top, so we're going to skip to above the eye. And there are 2 or 3 stripes that form a little point here over the eye, and I don't want to have that point go too close, so we're going to put that in first. I'm going to try and make sense of the lines that I put down. We'll start with the one that's all the way on the edge here. And here's where we can start having a little bit more freedom with the stripes and kind of just doing what the artwork calls for versus what we have down there. As long as you're not going to see the pencil marks, it doesn't really matter. And then we have one bigger line coming in from the forehead, and for that one, we're definitely going to transition into a purple. I'm even going to pull in some of the Rose of Ultramarine so that we can get something a little bit brighter here. This one comes across from the forehead. So worried I'm going to put it in the wrong spot. Here we go. I did put it in the wrong spot. It's fine. We will improvise. Before I started the video today, I lightened up all of my lines with a kneaded eraser, as I mentioned I would from the previous video. And now my recommendation would to be not do that on this far side. Because you won't be able to see them. And I think that I pretty greatly messed up here. I definitely wanted some more white in there. We can try and add some in with gouache later. But I would have liked to have done this without having to meet that. So that's a bit of a bummer. I added a little bit more of that darker blue color for up here. I'm going to go back to our ultramarine turquoise. I think it's been a while since we've done a really colorful one, and if you've been around long enough to have seen the last time we attempted that, it was the colorful lion, and I stayed composed in the video, but I had a bit of a breakdown while I was working on that piece, because working on these multicolored pieces while you have to talk to a camera and be on stream and explain what you're doing is actually very, very difficult. And a lot of the color choices have to be done intuitively, and it's hard to explain why you make the choices, and it's also easy to get distracted. So, and I have to stay out of the way of the camera, my head, so I can't get on top of my painting here, which would help discern where some of these lines are. And so during that process, I was like, oh, I'm not gonna finish this because I'm not happy with how it's turning out, and you know, XYZ. So I hope that this video is still helpful for all of you, and that I hope we get something that looks nice and that we're happy with. But just be aware of the extra challenges when trying to explain something like this, when there might not be a lot of words to use. It's more of observing and trying to make decisions on the fly here, and just seeing how it goes. But yeah, I'm definitely not happy with this area. I'll just see how it goes. Another difficult part of adding white in here is that it is a shadowed area, and so it's gonna ruin kind of that more ethereal quality that we have going on. All right, let's get back to our ultramarine turquoise and our phthalo turquoise. Get some more of these stripes in here. Come in. I'm trying to use my brush to do the width of the stripe and not have to go back and fiddle with it too much. Do want it to be a little bit wider in this area. And before we walk away from this for too long, I do want to make sure that this area gets kind of blended out so it doesn't get stuck in its stripes and we paint over it later. But all of this kind of feathers into a dark space. So soften off some of this turquoise for the moment. And I want to drop some of the purple in there as well. It's kind of a placeholder for right now, but something for our stripes to connect to at the top of the forehead. I guess we have left the station on doing this other ear. I'm just gonna drop in some variations. This all isn't just one color. We want to start thinking about transitioning to our lighter colors. So let's go into our Rose of Ultramarine. And this line tapers off nice and thin here. Don't want to be too heavy-handed. And then I'm going to pull some of our greens, our teals, and transition this stripe together. I'm going to use my damp brush up here, soften this off. Try not to be too heavy-handed, and we've got cricket hair. Put a little bit, oops, did not mean to put the blue over there, but put a little bit more of the light. I know it doesn't look like it on camera, but that did have some lighter purple in it. All right, then we can get our Rose of Ultramarine again. Oops, we lost our reference photo. All right, on the other side of this, we have some that don't go all the way up. So let's actually find, where does this connect on the other side? Just real quick so we can deal with this wet wash. There's a line over the eye. Let's just do that, I guess. Line over the eye. Oh, crud though, but that's the wrong color. Gersh darn it. I'll have words in just a second to explain what I'm doing. Okay. Whew. So I wanted to blend off this kind of crown area where all these stripes come together, but I'm not ready to transition to these lighter colors, even though I accidentally started to. So I wanted to put in those streaks and then soften them off so we can then layer on top of them later and put in our lighter colors. But we're gonna let them dry like that. I just wanted to make sure that we got this piece connected with the rest up here. And along the same vein, let's also do that higher up with this piece. So just starting off those stripes, but we're not going to finish them right now. All right. Then we can work on the transition over to those. I went up a little higher than I wanted to there. Try and work on our brush control. Make sure we don't run into other lines. And for this one, I'm going to start off with that rose of ultramarine. I'm going to soften off this area a tiny bit up here. And then we're going to transition into our brightest color, which is this Quin Magenta. And it's a core color, so it's going to take over when it hits other washes, so just be aware of that. Does that one go all the way down? It does. Gonna blend this a little bit better at the top. Try and push back that core a little bit. It's very opinionated. We're getting somewhere. I'm not convinced I've done all these lines properly. But we're trying. Next one. Going back into that Quin Magenta. I put this in the wrong spot. That is what is throwing me off. So we're gonna have to do some impromptu things that don't line up with the original. So this one is in the correct spot. And then this was supposed to be a stripe here. But it's not. We have a stripe here that isn't, it's supposed to be white. I'm going to fill that in now, and then we're going to ad-lib the stuff in the middle. And hopefully no one will ever know, except you guys. I'm going to darken the top of this with some rose of ultramarine and darken the bottom of it. a little bit of that rose of ultramarine on this one. I don't think you guys can hear, but Cricket is snoring. All right. I do feel like we need to put in these other stripes because we've already started them. So I don't know if I transitioned too quickly. We're gonna fade this rose of ultramarine into the magenta. And then we're gonna bring in our quinacridone burnt orange for the first time. Right over the eye. And then we're gonna fade it back to the magenta as we get closer to the snout again. And we'll hope that the core doesn't completely bully out that orange. We'll have to see. We're going to make up a stripe again to fill in this space. And pull in some of the rose of ultramarine towards the base again. And how about a little bit up here, just for fun. Stretch break. Oof. Well, we only messed up a lot and it still looks okay. So, you know, that's an okay win there. I'm fine with that. Come back to our quinacridone burnt orange. Blend it into the rose of ultramarine with the quinacridone magenta. And we're going to pull in our quinacridone gold for the first time as we come over the eye. I guess I didn't talk about why I picked the colors that I picked. I don't think I did anyway. I wanted a more jewel-toned rainbow situation. If you wanted brighter colors, you could do brighter colors. But you've probably been able to tell when you do see my more colorful pieces that I tend to gravitate towards jewel tones. I just think they're so pretty, especially in watercolor. So beautiful. I feel like in order not to mess this up, I need to continue going from the bottom so I see where these stripes are going. And of course, I should mention this. You don't have to start with all the stripes drawn. I've told you before that I don't start with all of my fur lines in, like my fur texture, when I'm doing fur. So if you want to completely wing all of the stripes, you can do that, but keep in mind that scale is really important, and I personally have a really hard time with scale. So often when I'm doing an animal pattern and the reference photo is a different size than the actual photo, I might make my spots or stripes too big or too small. And so by putting the lines in there, at least I know kind of what the scale is supposed to be, and if we need to make things up as we go, we can do that, but it just gives me a better idea how not to mess up the piece in terms of giving this zebra teeny tiny stripes or big fat stripes when in scale that wouldn't look appropriate. This one was supposed to be wider. I'm not going to touch it now because the wash has already started to dry. All right, I need to reposition a bit. And if you can see now, we have a fair amount in here, and the shadow hardly looks dark at all compared to everything else. So we're doing fine in that regard. We have one big fatty stripe that goes from the hair down to over the eye, and then we have another stripe in between that's much thinner. Let's see if we can manage. Quin Magenta. Quinacridone Burnt Orange. Quinacridone Gold. Where does this one end? It just kind of hovers. We are also going to put this rose of ultramarine at the top where it's a lot darker. And by picking all jewel tones, that also helps the colors work together a little bit better. If I had done some jewel tones and some really bright colors, it might look really off. When you're using a bunch of different colors, it's hard for this not to read as just like, oh, it's a literal rainbow that goes from one color to the next. So I'm trying to avoid that. Hopefully I'll be successful. But I hope that using the jewel tones and using something that all kind of fits in the same color story will help with that. All right. Just taking a little stretch, making sure my shoulders aren't too crazy tight. How long have we been going? An hour. A bit longer than an hour. All right. Coming back to the top, we're in a shadowed area again, so I kind of want to bring in some of our darker blues to start off this stripe. We're gonna soften it off at the top, because that's going to fade into a black. Oh, black. And then we're going to fade that into purple. And where's ultramarine? Oops, there's a big chunk of paint on there. Actually, I'm going to go straight into the Quin Magenta just so we can get this back in the right color family when we get back down to the face. And our Quin Gold. The Quin Magenta left a pretty harsh ring. It kind of settled down into the grooves there, which I don't love, but I can live with it. All right, that's our last like full stripe around the ears. There's some little spots and specks, so we're gonna move down to underneath the eye. Starting with there's a super thin stripe here, and then a thicker stripe here. Am I reading that correctly? I don't know if I am. All right, there's a black squiggle. Yes, okay. I see where it is now. So let's go with the quinacridone gold. I hope this is useful information for you guys to have. I know it's a bit chaotic with the different colors, but that is how this goes. So I'm going to try and make this gold as dark as I can to cover up this pencil. This is the orange. And then we'll finish off with the magenta. I am going to do both eyes a dark bluish purple color. So this area is going to be right next to that. Should go well since purple and yellow are opposites. If you can hear that noise outside, I'm really sorry. I don't know what it is. It occasionally goes off in the area. I don't know if it's an alarm or a power line or an insect. I really have no idea. I just know it's obnoxious. Okay, so I've got that big, nice golden highlight. We're going to come down with the orange. It's been so long since I've used quinacridone burnt orange. Let's go ahead and make this a mostly orange stripe. If you do make up your own stripes, make sure that you're adding variation and texture. Not all the stripes are gonna be the same width, things like that. I just don't want to forget to do this later. I'm gonna backtrack to one of my teal stripes. And just make it darker. It's really light right now. Doesn't really fit in with the rest. All right, this is the widest stripe that we've had so far. So how are we gonna treat it? I guess orange mostly, and a bit of the gold. You notice there, I stopped with the orange less than halfway through, knowing that when I put in the gold, the orange was going to kind of run into it. So make sure to account for transitions like that. These orange areas are also drying pretty light, so we might go over a second coat with them later. I don't know, guys, this might be another two-parter. No. Did I drop water here, or did they just dry like that? I don't know which of the two. We'll fix it later. Part of me wants to like push through and get it all done, but I'm worried that by the time I think the stripes are feasible, because once we get over here, they're bigger and like there's less details you have to worry about. But then we have to do like the mane and the ears and the nose and the eyes, and I don't want to do all those things while I am physically stressed, because then they won't turn out as well. So we'll see how we're doing after the stripes, but we might do like a second parter. We haven't even gotten to like the really complicated stuff down here that I had trouble even drawing. So we'll see how that goes. I think I want these stripes to be really cool, and I want these ones to stay warm. I'm a little worried that there won't be as much variation over here if they're just all gold. So I'm wondering if we can, I think we can switch back to like the purples and pinks down here, and then start the cooler colors on this side, and that should hopefully make some kind of color sense. Go over this orange again. And then we're gonna go back to orange. I really like that one. It's a fun one. And the next one, we're gonna do orange down here, and then we'll transition more to the pink, the magenta up top. That one looks a little funky. I think it'll be fine. We have our little spot down here. I'm gonna do that with the orange. Quin Magenta. And Rose of Ultramarine. I think this is the same stripe that goes up here. In that case, I'm actually going to paint over this orange with the purple. We'll bring the Rose of Ultramarine down here, and we'll fade it back into the orange and the gold. There we go. Made sense out of it. And the rest of the front part is muzzle. So we're not going to worry about that right now. All right. For this area, I am going to erase all of these lines, at least all the ones that I can. Some of them I think are stuck because they have water over them. Oops. But I don't want, I want as little interference as possible because we're probably not following those lines. I don't think it's going to happen. All right. Guys, it looks really cool. I haven't done anything like this before. It's pretty fun. All right, big stretches again. So we have a series of cheek stripes that all kind of just come down on that back side and connect with the bottom of the jaw, and they all kind of just like run into each other. So that's gonna be fun. Especially because with each line, I want the bottom to be purple and the top to be this yellowish color, so let's get started, I guess. You know what would be smart of me is to not use a size 6 brush. Let's get a smaller one. I feel like there's a lot of opportunity to mess up. So going down to a size 4. Oh, this stripe goes all the way back, or did go all the way back under the eye. It's not how we painted it, so I guess we'll just do a new one. I'm only going to work on 2 lines at a time so that they don't dry too much. I go over to our burnt orange. Rose of Ultramarine. I don't like that. I'm going to split that one. Hopefully it's not too late. Do a little double connection down here. I'm going to come back up here, try and connect this to something. I feel like it's just floating here. We can connect this. I'm gonna do this full back stripe first, and then we'll do a little guy in the middle. I want to make sure that the spacing is right though. That was supposed to be orange. Let's see if it got much. I'm gonna do a little teeny tiny one up here. And then a little one down here. Fill in that space. Oh yeah, the neck's hurting after that. Definitely gonna need a break. I think we also need one more. Here it comes forward. It's bordering on a little bit too dark and purple on the bottom of that chin than I wanted. I am going to go in with my magenta and just try and brighten things up a bit. I do want to say I specifically refrained from looking at any Lisa Frank work before I did this, just so I wouldn't be heavily influenced by a particular way of doing this. So I still want it to look nice, and obviously with the rainbow zebra it's going to look Lisa Frank-esque, but I did very intentionally not remind myself of what her work specifically looked like with the color changes. So I hope I'm not too spot on to that, but this is what felt right to me, and so hopefully it works well for you guys too. All right. More rows of ultramarine here. And I go with the burnt orange here. Sorry I keep reaching across. Again, most of you who've been around a while know why I do this, but if you're new watching this tutorial, if I have my palette on my right hand side, it means that my painting is on the left, which means I'm working directly over the top of the painting, and it's really hard for you guys to see what I'm working on, even more so than if I'm accidentally over the top of it in this position. So we sacrifice the reaching across for paint in order to make sure that you can see what's going on. But I apologize if it's distracting for any of you guys. I'm actually going to split this off onto 2 separate stripes. Oof, I can't tell what's what, guys. Directly under the ear, that's where I am. That is neck and is not face. So we need to set that back. I'm actually gonna drop a bunch of purple on it. I guess it should have been magenta, huh? No, I wanted it purple, so it sat back on the neck. Oh well. I'm going to come back to that. We're going to go back to this next stripe. Where is the first? We've got, this is a stripe, this is a stripe, this is a stripe, so there needs to be space there. Okay. And then I'm going to drop some of the Dioxazine violet at the bottom here. And then what to do about this area behind the eye, because I messed it up. It's kind of like a squished neck stripe. This is face stripe here, and then there is a neck stripe behind it that it's not really attached to. I'm going to paint over it cleanly, not blending with the gold in front of it, so we can try and distinguish them as two different stripes that are touching. But that aren't on the same surface, maybe? I don't know how successful it is, but that's what we're going to go with. You can adjust it later if we come back and decide it looks completely atrocious. I'm going to add a little glaze of the magenta in here. Okay, I'm ready for some bigger stripes. How about you? All right, we have a chin stripe touching other stripes that is going to be very dark in color. Thinking, sorry, brain stall. Getting our Phthalo turquoise and our Dioxazine. This makes an anthraquinone-like color or a really saturated indanthrone. Those are the same color. I meant, no, I think that's what I meant. Okay. It makes a really dark, saturated, warm blue, basically. I guess it's a cool blue. It's like anthraquinone blue, but if it were cooler and more green toned. You could use anthraquinone blue if you want. I mean, you can use any colors, like I mentioned before, if you want, but because we already have so many colors going on, I didn't want to add more colors than necessary, and if I can mix a hue with colors I'm already using, I'd rather do that, just so that we don't have so many colors fighting with each other for attention. So that was my thought with not adding like a more proper blue, is that we can mix one of those blues with the other colors that we're using. Okay, that horribly obnoxious noise is still going. It'll like stop for a few moments and then come back. So maybe it is good if we take a break after all these stripes, and then you won't have to listen to it anymore. All right, so how I want to do these, if we look back at the little guy here, is I still want there to be yellow on the highlighted parts, and then we're gonna transition those into a cooler color. So it's gonna be a little tricky because we're gonna be going through pretty much the entire range that we've been using on the rest of the painting. So let's give it a go. We're gonna start up at the top of this stripe because next to it we already have purple stripes. So in order to make a transition back into the highlight color, we want to make sure that we're not going too heavy with the darker colors up here. So we're going to go Rose of Ultramarine. And next to it, on the other side of that same stripe, is going to be the magenta. So that when we get to the next stripe, we can do orange and gold. Yeah? All right. I guess we could even do a little orange on this one. I don't want to jump straight to gold because I think it's too much of a jump. Wow, it's even louder now. I don't know what that is, you guys. I'm gonna mute myself until it stops. I'm sorry. Oh my goodness. Guess I just need to go out there and like look to see what's causing it. At least for my own sanity of knowing what the heck is going on. This is an area that if you haven't already pre-drawn your stripes, definitely make sure, let's start it again, make sure that you are transitioning from really thin stripes to fatter stripes, or depending on the species of zebra, they might still be thin. I'm gonna mute myself again. Going back in with magenta. Can you guys hear that? Is that an insect or is that like a man-made thing? It sounds mechanical, but it keeps like moving closer and further away, and I don't know what would be causing that at 7:30 at night. I think it's moving farther away again, whatever it is. Hopefully we have a few moments to talk in peace. This is a little bit difficult to make a smooth transition that doesn't look too overworked, I guess. Like you can see on this stripe, it doesn't flow very well. So we're gonna have to do another layer over that. I guess we can do that right now. I want it to be like pretty and vibrant, but transitioning so many colors off all in a row is not easy. And making sure that they each kind of flow and tell the story of, you know, there's a highlight up here and these are shadows. Hopefully it didn't get too lost in translation. Y'all can let me know. I'm gonna take out the gold in that stripe just because I feel like it doesn't read well. All right. Okay, no, I didn't paint over it. There's like a little, like a peak window on one of the stripes. I thought I painted over it, but it's on the next one. I'm gonna paint the inside edge of this a little bit darker. There we go. All right, next one is a really big chunky thing. So we're gonna lift the highlight. Are we gonna lift the highlight? What color do we want the main to be? It's a good question. I feel like I want to make our lives easier and make the story read better. So we are going to go with gold all the way up to the top. My dirty water is dirty, but my clean water is also pretty dirty. This is where we start to have like the neck wrinkles, and I honestly don't know how well this is gonna go over and if I should just leave them off entirely. Not sure how it's gonna read, but I feel like we're kind of committed. This is gonna dry with a really hard edge. It wasn't exactly what I wanted to happen, but oh well. And then we're gonna transition into the orange. It's gonna dry a lot lighter than that. And our magenta. Rose of Ultramarine. We're gonna fade this off because it goes into a big stripe here. Move to the I just splattered Dioxazine all over my palette, which is great. I really want to prevent these transitions from being static. Really try and blend them off so it's not just like bars of color. Want to be careful of our little splotch to paint around. More of our Dioxazine in here. Hasn't had much of a spotlight yet. A little worried about a back run happening over here. I was gonna go top down again, but it makes more sense to go this direction. Yep, back run incoming. So you definitely don't want something like that where it's just straight across. Gonna blend up and just make sure that when you blend up that you don't lose too much of the pigment. Try and put some more in there. Trying to wet this edge again. I kind of want to blend this purple higher, but I also really like what's happening in that wash, so I'm not going to touch it. Got really muddy over here, that's unfortunate. I'm try and lift this up so it not be so murky. Don't fail me now, quinacridone gold. Almost there. A couple more big guys. I probably definitely should have left out the wrinkles. It just makes it way harder. All right, wheel. I'm not sure how I feel about this because the brightest point is actually, there's a ridge here and there's also a ridge down here, but I just feel like doing that many transitions is gonna look overworked. I'm gonna put a wet edge down there so I can spend a little bit more time blending off this area in the magenta. Dioxazine. Guess we didn't use much of that ultramarine turquoise either. Guess I could start transitioning down here in this bottom corner. Don't know if it's gonna look odd though. Yeah, it looks fine. I feel like that was perhaps a little bit too abrupt. I'm gonna mix some of this blue in here. And then we'll do more of it on the next stripe. Lots of gradated wash practice in this one, that's for sure. Two/4 more, depending on how you look at it. Let's go bottom up, and then that way, on both of these, there is a central bottom piece, and then it branches into two pieces going up. So maybe if we work quickly enough, we can make this work. All right, got our ultramarine turquoise. We got our blue, our phthalo turquoise mixed with dioxazine, which make a blue. And then we're gonna go into our dioxazine. Nice inky dark purple. I'm gonna bring that on both sides of this branch. Ultramarine, rose of ultramarine, I mean. We can do our Quin Magenta. Make sure that stays a little wet. Color is so pigmented. That transition was a lot smaller than the stripe above it. Try and pull this up a bit. I'm shocked that this quinacridone burnt orange has taken over the Quin Magenta. Ooh, this has started drying already. Not good, not good. I'm wondering if my water is the problem with this quinacridone gold. It's a little murky. I didn't expect it to cause so many problems. But these gold washes are not looking great. Again, there's not very much magenta here, and I'd like to add more, but it's doing a really cool thing with the rose of ultramarine down there, so I don't want to touch it. All right, last one, y'all. And they're short, which means we don't have to do the entire transition. Put more of a teal in this one. And generally speaking, you don't want to draw the viewer's eye away from the focal area. So I actually don't want to put any super bright colors down here. So I'm glad that our transition is ending with the rose of ultramarine and not the magenta, because then we can keep this area as kind of like it's there and it's important to the painting, but it's not gonna like pull your vision down to that corner. All right, guys, well, that is a good 2+ hours. So we are gonna wrap up there for today. Sorry / I don't know if I should be sorry that it's taking 3 separate tutorials for this one. I know the last one isn't necessarily part of the tutorial, just depending on whether or not you wanted information on that, but hopefully you guys like these longer format tutorials, that they're helpful. I feel like I can only paint so much in an hour, so this longer painting process is more true to how I would normally work off camera. So hopefully it's helpful to see, and we will come back tomorrow for finishing off of the details. So the nose, the ears, the mane, and the eyes, and doing any other second layers that we need to do to darken up some areas, to re-solidify them. And I hope you guys like it. I like how it's coming along. I hope that we can do it justice by finishing off all the details. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you all for your support, and I will see you in the next one.